Bob, most brain scientists say that the mind and the brain are exactly the same thing. As a neuroscientist who studies sleep and dreams, what do you say?
I don't understand the question of the mind and brain being the same, because I can take a brain and put it in a jar, and it's there and there's no mind there. We know that people can be in coma and have a brain that's still there and still active, but there appears to be no consciousness. And when you sleep, you go through periods where it appears that there's no, or at most very minimal, conscious activity. So if you wanted to say that the brain and the mind were the same thing, you'd have to say that the mind is a feature of the brain some of the time when it's doing something. The example of dreaming is a very funny one, because if you talk to neurologists will say when you're asleep you're unconscious. I mean, if you're not unconscious when you're asleep, when are you unconscious? But if you're not conscious when you're dreaming, what are you? So at the very least we have these different kinds of consciousness, all with the same brain. So when I try to tease it apart, what I imagine is not that they're the same, but to me the question is the mind totally explained by the brain? And if that was the question, I would say my guess is yes. We can probably explain all of it except its very existence. And that's the rub. We don't know how matter gives rise to mind. And as far as we know, it seems to require a brain. But it looks like from all of our studies, both in neurology and in sleep research, that consciousness is a variable thing. I think of it more as software, or not even software, but the running of the program itself. It's an activity of the brain that has this very bizarre property of having self-awareness. As far as we know, as far as we can explain anything about the mind, the explanation is that it's an emergent property, a phenomenon that's entirely produced by the brain. But that
with no residual, nothing, you don't need anything other than what's in the brain to produce all the characteristics, the so-called quality of the feelings of what we have.
There is nothing other than the brain that explains anything that the brain doesn't. Okay, the brain has not yet explained why qualia exist. The brain sciences have not given us any indication of how conscious awareness of anything, of color, of warmth, of fear, of hunger, how any of those feelings or images can arise out of the activity of the brain. But we know that you absolutely need the brain for all of those things to occur, and we have found nothing else that can give us additional explanatory power. And so the only thing that we know that if you muck around with it scientifically can massively alter or eliminate consciousness is things that have to do with the brain. And so in our shorthand jargon, we say that the brain totally explains the mind, but it really doesn't, because there's this piece still that nothing explains.